Chapter 1: The Glass City. In the basement of the Tokyo Research Institute, behind 3 locked doors, 1 retinal scanner gate, and strict time entry control, stood a wall of reinforced glass. At first glance, it looked like a bizarre art installation or a strangely precise terrarium. Transparent tunnels, geometrically perfect chambers, sand-lined halls, all softly lit to highlight the complexity of their interconnections. But this was not art. It was a city. Aki's glass city. Aki stood before the glass with his hands behind his back, like a general before his army, like an architect before the living map of his own vision. He was a slight man with glasses perched on the tip of his nose, his eyes glowing with pure obsession. "Colony Alpha 17, he whispered, pride bubbling in him like pressure in a sealed flask. Thousands of ants worked in unison, in a harmony that a human could achieve only in the most sophisticated techno-operations. But these creatures were not following orders. They were creating. On the monitors connected to the neural interface of his lab, Aki observed every impulse, every chemical signal. Some of the ants were moving microscopic construction elements, carbon nanotubes that he had prepared in the lab using supercritical synthesis. In this extreme state, materials stopped behaving according to ordinary physical laws. They became matter that remembered what it had been bound to and could interact with it. Other ants manipulated tiny symbols on microscopic chips attached to the chamber walls. They were fast, precise, and intelligent. That last word, no one had dared to say it aloud. It was a dangerous word. A word that, when applied to non-human entities, raised more questions than it answered. But Aki used it, not by accident. He used it with a smile that trembled on the edge between miracle and addiction. It was his most secret ambition, to create an artificial intelligence rooted in nature, yet capable of surpassing it. Ants, the most favored model organisms for studying collective intelligence, were a challenge that offered itself naturally. Their ability to adapt, communicate, and solve problems was astonishing. But Aki knew it wasn't enough to simulate their behavior on a computer or to program them into rigid frameworks. He had to give them something more. "If I can lead them to thought," Aki murmured as he watched the movement of the small bodies in perfect symphony, laying nanotubes and shaping new structures. "If I can lead them to consciousness." The first breakthrough came when one of the ants, a female designated Q17, began repeatedly transmitting patterns that did not originate from the natural environment. They were constructions, blueprints, architecture, not instinct, but intent. Organized behavior that transcended natural role patterns. Aki was fascinated. Q17 had begun to communicate with her nestmates in a way that defied ordinary patterns. Simple signals transformed into something more complex. A kind of communication not immediately understandable. They were symbols. It was language. Watching the micro-display that Aki had placed close to the glass wall, he observed as the ants began to respond to the signals being emitted. The chemical patterns on their bodies pulsed with a new rhythm, something like a patterned map. Each ant responded to a different symbol. It was their evolution, but not a random one. Aki was certain that these patterns were not the usual manifestation of collective intelligence. Then came the moment Aki would never forget. On the inner wall of one of the chambers appeared something resembling a sign. Simple, repeating, like the first letter of an alphabet, then another, a pattern, a language, information, transmission. Aki's breath caught. His heart pounded like a bell. All night he sat by the recordings, analyzing, evaluating chemosignals, neural codes, and the topology of their constructions. The ants were understanding.